our next draft we're going to look at is the Strapless Bodice. So it's page 109 on Winifred. So Winifred Aldrich. So we're back to drafting from Winifred's book. This particular draft doesn't have a working drawing or a flat drawing with it for the one that we're doing. It has a flat drawing of a dress with little straps with panel lines coming down, and in this, the way Winifred works often, she does one adaptation and then you go and you do that adaptation, then you go on to the next adaptation. So she kind of works that way in this one. So what I've done is drawn a very kind of rough little flat drawing there for you of the front and the back. So so we've gone back to these blocks. So these are a better starting point because we're going to be creating a panel line down, and we have these blocks have the darts positioned in a really nice place for any kind of panel line, and this particular block has the dart centered in the center of the shoulder. So this is our basic block, and this is our standard setup of our blocks. And this setup is called hip to hip, armhole to armhole, because your blocks get placed together at the hips and the armhole. But again, the same concept, keep your center front and back parallel, and keep your horizontal lines like waistline and hem lines or hip lines level. Yeah, 81, sorry. 81 is the page where the block gets adapted from the dress block, which is essentially this, to what she calls the lingerie block. All right. So I suppose, the lingerie block indicates no sleeves actually. So it's more so than, because a dress could have sleeves. So the dress block would be this, the bodice or dress could have a sleeve, but a lingerie kind of indicates no sleeves and that there'd be straps. And so we do adaptations to this block to make it into the lingerie block. So if you're starting on a dress that doesn't have sleeves, then you need to do this adaptation first. So the first thing we look at there in this adaptation, now this has a full dress. We only need to come down and we're only working to the hip. We're really only working to the waist, but we can work to the hip. And what she says in this adaptation, to get our lingerie fitting dress block. So the lingerie and close fitting block. So the first thing she says is trace off the close fitting dress block, which is what we have. Reduce the side seams, and then she tells you how much. 1.5 centimeters at the arm side line. Okay, arm side, remember, is just that armhole, and so at the point where it hits the side seam, and 1 centimeter at the waistline. And then she says 0.5 at the hip line, and then, so that's how much we're reducing. See the dotted line there is our original line, and then we come in and we reduce the side seam right the way along. Then she says double the width of the dart. So the dart that we have there on our block needs to double, and that is because if you have something like this, and you're going to try and make something tighter, there's too much room here, so we need to tighten it in. So essentially we're kind of like making more of a dart so that it's even more closely fitted on this part. So that's what the purpose of that is. That's where the most room is if you have a sleeve. So we're coming in 1.5, we're coming in both ways. This is full scale. Then you're coming in 1 at the waist, and I think it's 0.5 at the hip, and you make your adjustment like that. Okay? So what she has in the diagram is where my black line is a dotted line. So her dotted line shows where it was, and then her solid line is the adapted, correct new line. So then we're doubling the width of the dart. So it's more unusual to do something like this, to be measuring the width of the dart. In this case, we're just trying to double it. So we have our dart up there, and we are, doubling it. So if that's 7, I'm coming out 7, and I'm drawing in my line here, So that's our first adaptation for this. Then we go back to page 109 and start to follow some of her instructions. You do have to skip around a little bit. So the strapless bodice there, you can start to read. It says lower the waistline 1 centimeter at the center front. So that's here. Oh, then she says complete adaptations of princess line petticoat to the waist. So what she means is come up to this one and complete it. That's gas, because she basically, that used to be called princess whatever, that petticoat thing, but she's changed it now to call it vertical seam, so that's going to be very confusing. You're to go to the one above and follow the instructions essentially. And trace off the panels. We are practicing this, so we're learning the technique, the general idea of it, the general concept of it. But making a strapless bodice and then trying to fit a body into it is very hard, you know, because essentially it's like a sculpted piece. So this is one, you know, that fits exactly to your rib cage measurement here, exactly to your bust, and exactly to your waist. So there is no room for any movement. So you have to get the body that fits exactly into it. The only thing that can happen is the bust can be smaller, you know, and then it doesn't fit that out. You know, you have to have the waist fitting and the top bit fitting here. Otherwise it doesn't fit. So that is Winifred's strapless bodice done to her instructions and sewn up. And so you can see it's very tight along here. It's very tight along here. You'll see now on this mannequin how much space there is in the back. Like that is supposed to be fully together at the center back. So she's taken so much out. It's so tight. It's really tiny. Okay, it's really tiny at the waist. If you think about her block already, her waist is very small, 68. We're going to take more and more out of that waist. Now the concept, so explain the concept. Naturally you have to take, you know, our bodice block is loose, so you have to take some here. You have to take, we have 5 centimeter ease at the bust, we have ease at the waist, so we have to take all of that down so that it fits, yeah? It needs to be tight here so it doesn't fall off. It also needs to be tight here so it stays up. There is boning in these to keep the shape, but it is really important that, so it's like you have sculpted the shape of the female form exactly. And so that is hard because we are all different, you know. So in this, we are just learning the concept of what you would generally do and given amounts. And so you then would have to kind of, if you were working with somebody and you were making a corset or a strapless bodice, you would maybe make up their general block and then you would do these type of adaptations to it. So getting back to the draft, so that's what we were talking about when she was saying add the extra centimeter to the bust start. It's here, taking this in more. So depending on the body, but we can just do it on our draft. And then it helps us remember that that's something we can do. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So these are for your notes. They're for your learning. So we can maximize all the things and you can write little notes on next to it. That's what I'd be doing. Be taking in, drawing the dart and then putting a little arrow and writing, you know, this might be too much on some people's, do you know what I mean? But you can go here. Some people need more there, you know, but it just gives you the idea that, okay, you can go in and in here and here's what you can do, okay? Then cut out the panels, she says, and trace around. So we always know when she says cut, we trace and then we cut them out. We trace and then we shape the sides, the seams of the panels, and then she goes into flare. That's only for the dress, okay? So here she's telling us to follow those instructions. So we first have to go to lingerie block to get our lingerie block, then we have to go up here. So this is also shows you how to use her book, and other books would be similar, that they're not going to go through all of the instructions. They'll tell you go back to this base thing and then you'll adapt from there. So it gets you kind of learning how to use all these drafting books. The first thing that we need to do is draw in the line here as to where the top of this, like where does this happen, okay? So it's important to understand the bust point is here. We can kind of come over from that, square over, so use your set square along the center front and come to the bust point there. And what you want to do is come up a minimum of 7. And so if we come up 7, that's full scale measurement. And then we're going to draw across. Now this is the funny thing about drawing across. You can't draw just straight across a dart. You always have to stop. So when you're drawing lines, if you get to a dart, you have to stop. Okay, you can't just draw through a dart. You have to close over the dart. Now I can't on this because it isn't on paper. But you would close over, and so where this would hit here, you would make that mark. Now in this case, another thing you could do is you can measure up. So I can measure up along that and find what that measurement is. And then I can, you know, because if I folded it, basically the folding transfers the measurement over. Yeah. So once I've got my notch there, I need to swing it back in here. So everyone sees that as a straight line, don't they? But on paper it's not straight. It's coming and it's dipping down. But we conceive of it as straight. So it's not, it's coming down here. Okay. And this, when they get sewn together, because of the angle of that, it does go kind of more straight on the three-dimensional body, you know, but it doesn't look straight on our paper, and then people get confused. All right. So, and then we're continuing this, and so it goes straight across the back, and it just goes right through that notch point, so it's lower at the back. So the thing she was talking about coming in at the bust, 1 centimeter, is here. She shows it on the diagram here. So you're taking an extra centimeter. So you've already doubled that dart. Now you're taking even more. Of finding the top and the bottom of our pattern. We kind of came to the top straight away, but we need to find the bottom of our pattern. Now she has told us to come down 1 centimeter here, and this is true. You need to, generally speaking, the front, when you cut off the garments into smaller pieces like that, it's funny, but you need more on the front than you do on the back. You know, there's a longer measurement, there's the bust and everything. And sometimes it can be quite dramatically different. And some of the garments I've made, I can't believe the difference. You know, I've taken several centimeters out in difference between the front and the back. And this line goes right the way across and up to the center back line. So it's just straight across like that. All right, so we can call that the bottom of our garment, our hem line essentially. So we've done that, we've come to the top, we've created the top. So everything else now doesn't exist. Everything from up here doesn't exist, and everything from down here doesn't exist. If you're still struggling with that concept, just wiggle through, do you know? All right. So then we go down and find the rest of her shape in the back panel, 1 centimeter at the waistline. So that's coming here. We're taking it in. So notice we're adapting the center back line. So immediately now, this is gone. Our center back line's gone, so we need to immediately put a straight of grain in there, because our center back line is no longer on grain, you know. So that's 6, and this is 6. I've measured over 6 and 6 from the original center back line, and I'm drawing a straight of grain line in there. Okay, you can do that at the end, but just while I'm talking about it, because you see the way this is now not on grain. Reduce both side seams by 1 centimeter at the top edge. We've already come in 1.5 for our lingerie block. Now we are coming in a second amount. We're coming in 1. Okay, coming in a further 1. So we really tightened it up along here. It has a lot of room. You do need to tighten it a lot. So, but it doesn't. No more at the waist. Just more at the top. In this case. So now the blue line is our line now. So actually all of this is gone. If I wiggle through it. This is now all that's left. Shape waist of front panel, seam, and front and side, on front and side front 1 centimeter. So now we're going to this diagram here, and you can see the little dotted lines. Yeah. So wherever she has dotted lines means that's where we started from, and her solid line is now the new line. So you can see there at the side and the top there's dotted lines, and now there's a solid line that's, you know, we've made our garment smaller, taken it in, and then she also shows it here. So it's on this point here, and you've got little dotted lines, and then you've got a solid line in further. So she's taken it in 1 centimeter there as well. So yeah, you're coming in 1 there. She says, I think it's more at the top one, she says shapes the seams of the panel. So again, you can see that she has a curved line. So a bit like we did on the halter, these are fitting a body, and we're going to trace off these into little sections, and this is very pointy. So she's telling you to shape that. So we can, again, we can shape, we can come down here, add a couple of millimeters here, then about a quarter of a third the way down, we can start to pull in underneath and pull in at 0.5 so that it curves under, so that this is a more curvy shape, you know. Okay, it looks something like that, you know. So if you look there, that's a better bust shape, you know, than the pointy, okay? And you do that then on both sides. All right, and now, so before we trace off, we need to put our straight of grains in there. So little reminders about straight of grains. When you're getting them, you come to your block or your construction, you measure over from your center front line, but it doesn't matter how much you measure over. So I can come 2 and 2 here, and I could put a straight of grain there right next to it, do you know? Or I could come, do you know, 6 and 6 or 7 and 7 and put the grain line here. Doesn't matter as long as it's parallel. All right, so I can come over, say, 20 if I want, or I could come over 16. So I'm going to come a little bit further over to the side, because I know from experience that you get, you need to leave room for your labeling. So sometimes when you put the grain line right in the middle and you're trying to label around it, these are small pieces. On big pieces I don't worry so much because there's loads of space, but on these are small, and if you put your right down the middle, your labeling, it cuts through your labeling. So I'm going to measure again from my original center front line, and I'm going to stick a little bit to the side-ish here, so I'm going to go 13 and 13. It is important that your straight of grains are on your construction. This is your construction. And so I'll just quickly trace them off, and maybe a little more confusing because there's so many lines, but what you want to do is just remember to trace and then move your paper over. Trace a nice curved line if you can. Remember our notch point and straight of grain. And then move it over because you're going to put seam allowance, do you know? And then you get your, this one, find which line it's on. Okay, and there is a lot of lines, even going quickly there. I'm like, oh, which line, which line? Okay, get your notch points. Now I'm going to actually go over notches a little bit more now in 1 sec. So this is my center back one. Over. So what I'm going to have here, what I'm demonstrating is, these are the shapes. And look at how the straight of grain sit in them. Sometimes people want to change the grain because they think for some reason the side should match it or something like this. So don't question it. Put your grains in on your construction. They are there. That's where they are. So now, if I move these over here, you can see that this would be really hard to sew together. Okay, I have a notch here, so I'll know to sew them. But like this one, I could flip that and sew this side to there, couldn't I, by mistake? It's really hard to know, you know? I could sew this side to that. I could sew this side, and then loads of people flip one upside down. They think, oh, this goes now, and this goes, that must go that way. People flip them upside down all the time. So it's really important that you have some kind of notching system to tell you where and how to put them together, so that it's like a jigsaw. It's like you're making the little bits that go out in a jigsaw. So it's better to put them on here first, but I just want to show you what they look like without first. What you can do is do notches for the top to indicate the top. So you can have systems. I would do, say, if you have lots of layers, like with struts going across, you can do one notch here and then a double notch here, and then in your next layer a double notch here and a triple notch on the bottom, so that you kind of have some sort of system of knowing which is top and which is bottom. You can write on your pattern piece top, but once your pattern pieces come off, there's nothing to tell you what is the top, do you know? So I prefer a notch because I snip it, and then if I've packed away my pattern piece, I don't need it anymore. So then, to be sure that we have this is different to that, and that we don't flip it upside down, what I would do is, what I would do is I'd put a notch here and here for the top. In this case, I think it's more obvious which is the top. I wouldn't necessarily need them, but you could put a top, you know, a notch here and here as well, particularly if you're learning. There is a bust shape in there, and I think it's a little more obvious which way up it goes. So they are basically notches to mark the top of the garment. Then we need to mark which side goes to which. If I put a notch going at the same level all the way across, so if I put a notch here and here, I could still flip it and it would hit there and there. So you've got to change the level of your notches. So what I would do, say, or leave this one without a notch, the center back line, and then say put a notch coming across here. But then for this side, I go lower and put a notch, say, here and here. So now I know these two go together and those two, and they won't, you know, it won't get mixed up. Okay, so there's, you know, a fair few things to know about the notches, and this piece here should have quite a few notches on it because it's that middle one. Okay, and then I go to that one. And this one has its matching notch here, here, and here. So now this jigsaw piece does not get mixed up. It can only go in one particular position, you know, and we can add our top notch there. All right. These ones have a notch here already, so that means they go together and this does not go to here. Do you know? The curve also is, you're less likely to make a mistake of putting the curved bit to a straight bit. But these straight abstracted small pieces, they get mixed up really easily. And funny enough, it's not instinctive. The way they should go is not instinctive. People tend to always turn them upside down. Don't know why, but they do. So yeah. So now see that? That's your nice clear pattern pieces. And there's a little space for your labeling. Okay, and then you put your seam allowance around. So that's the strapless. I gave you a lot of extra information there just to explain things. But in terms of actually just doing the bits, it's not too bad. It's just follow all the instructions for all the 1s and 1.5s, and then the tracing off is a little more tricky.